This is Latitude at Frontline. On Sunday, June 1st, that is yesterday, Bangladesh's International Criminal Court formally charged the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina for ordering police action against student protesters in the weeks leading to her dramatic ouster on August 5th last year. The court has issued warrants for Ms. Hasina's arrest, as well as for the arrest of her Home Minister and the former police chief. The court has asked that Ms. Hasina be produced before the court on June 16. Ms. Hasina lives in exile in India. I am Nirupama Subramanian, the host of this show, and to understand the implications of the latest developments for Bangladesh, for the Awami League, and for India-Bangladesh relations, my guest today is the well-known and respected Bangladeshi journalist Syed Badrul Ahsan, who lives in London. Welcome to Latitude, Mr. Ahsan.
Thank you, Mr. Romanian. It's a pleasure.
I will begin by asking you about this indictment. She's been indicted for ordering the police to fire on the protesters, which resulted in the death of several hundreds people, including students, as reported. How is the party reacting to this? How is the Awami League reacting to this?
Thank you for having me on the program. First of all, the indictment, this is a state of irony in Bangladesh. The ICT, this tribunal, was set up, was put in place by the erstwhile Awami League government to try collaborators, the 1971 collaborators of the Pakistani military regime in Bangladesh. And as you might well remember, a good number of these collaborators were sentenced to death, and some of them were even executed. Now, the tables have been turned, and this ICT, this tribunal, is making all the moves to try Sheikh Hasina and members of former government. Now, to your question, how the Awami League is taking it. Now, the Awami League at this point is in a very desperate situation. It is, of course, it's not organized at all, and there's no particular leadership that can really give the people of the country or the international community a public statement on how it feels. Because the problem with the Awami League since August last year is that it has never been able to organize itself. This is in contrast to the situation which we had in 1971 when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founder of the country, was arrested by the Pakistan army and was spirited away to what was then West Pakistan. But then there was a second tier of leadership which did organize the liberation war, and with the moral and military assistance of India, succeeded in liberating the country from Pakistan. Then post-1975, after Sheikh Mujib's assassination and the assassinations of the four leaders of the provisional 1971 government, the Awami League was in a sad situation. It was divided into three factions. But then, at one point in 1981, Sheikh Hasina, who had been in exile in Delhi, she came back to Dhaka and took charge of the Awami League. So that kind of situation, 1971 and post-1975, it doesn't happen to be there, because the kind of repression that has been going on against Awami League leaders, Awami League activists, and Awami League supporters over the last 4 months, that has quite placed a kind of situation on the Awami League which doesn't allow it to come out in public. Although in recent times there have been some sporadic protests by young Awami League activists, for example, the Band Chhatra League, the Juba League, the Youth League, that is, and also Awami League people, but then they're all scattered. So publicly, individually on social media, and people who converse with each other, people who post items on social media, they have been protesting these moves. But unfortunately, these protests are not being recorded, are not being put in documented form in the nation's media, because the media is under severe restraints. Now, the interim government always will tell you that there are no restrictions on freedom of the press, but then there's no freedom of the press at all. There is mob violence, as a result of which the media are also very careful in exercising what they have to print, what they do not have to print. They're exercising, in simple words, self-censorship. But then, yes, it is a bad situation. The country has been made to go take an absolute 180-degree turn towards times which we did not expect. So what we have in Bangladesh today is a situation where the country, except for the name of the country, the People's Republic of Bangladesh, everything has been hollowed out. There's a concerted, there's a deliberate program of eliminating or doing away with everything that had to do with the 1971 War of Liberation. And as far as Sheikh Hasina is concerned, the indictments against her and her former ministers, that can be done, of course. I mean, no one argues over the fact that there was corruption during the 15-year rule of the Awami League. But then the process is what matters. See, people who are there in the ICT today were never disposed in a friendly way towards the Awami League or towards democratic secular politics. So that is what is very concerning. Sheikh Hasina is in Delhi. Her ministers are in different countries or in hiding. Many of those ministers and former lawmakers, they are in jail without any recourse to the rule of law. Lawyers are not willing to help them, are not ready to help them because of mob violence, because of the pressure on them, because of the demand that these Awami League politicians or Awami League supporters or Awami League activists should not be defended in court. So that says a whole lot of things about the state of the rule of law in the country at present.
But I'm going to ask you first if there is concern in the party that India might actually ask the former Prime Minister to leave the country, to leave India and return to Bangladesh to face trial, perhaps for the sake of good relations with Bangladesh now and in the future.
That kind of concern is not there really because of certain factors. One is that under the Awami League government, good relations were there with India, previously with the Congress government, and since 2014 with the BJP government led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So the feeling is that Mr. Modi will not take any steps to have Sheikh Hasina extradited to Bangladesh for another reason. I mean, the question of friendly relations is always there, the background to friendly relations. But at the same time, there's the feeling that if at all Sheikh Hasina is extradited to Bangladesh along with her former cabinet colleagues, justice will not be served because the feeling in Bangladesh at the moment is that the judgment has already been delivered, and student supporters, these young supporters of the interim government, have in the past few months made it clear that Sheikh Hasina will be brought back to Dhaka and will be hanged. So when this question of hanging or execution before a trial, or when people look to a judicial killing of a former prime minister, I don't think the Indian government will agree to that. Beyond and above that, of course, the Modi government can go for friendly relations with Bangladesh. Friendly, well, I would not say friendly. That's a kind of accommodation. It's understood that an elected government in India or an elected government anywhere will not be comfortable with an unelected government of the kind that exists in Bangladesh. So what India would do is to exercise gentle pressure and influence on the Yunus government so that things in Bangladesh get back on the right track. But then again, there are the difficulties. The Awami League, which is the party which liberated the country, that has been placed under a ban, which is again a huge irony for the country. On the other hand, the Jamaat Islami, which violently opposed Bangladesh's liberation in 1971 and supported the Pakistan army in all its actions, that has come to the forefront, and that is playing a leading role in national politics today, even a role that is bigger than the role of the other political party, the other major political party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. So these things, I think the Indian government will take these things into consideration. In the first place, the Chhatra League was banned, was banned not through legal means. Of course, the government will, the authorities will tell you that we took these measures through legal means. But the fact remains that the Chhatra League was banned through mob pressure.
I'll just make it clear to viewers that the Chhatra League is the students' wing of the Awami League.
Exactly. So the students wing of the Awami League, the Chhatra League, was banned under mob pressure. Then this demand arose among these young supporters of young followers of the Yunus regime that the Awami League should be banned. Now the difficulty they have banned the Awami League, the activities of the Awami League, and the government, under pressure from other political parties, is also mulling the issue of general elections. But the point is, with the Awami League banned, it is anywhere between 35 to 40%, perhaps more, of voters who have been disenfranchised. That creates a problem. So this is also something which the international community has to take into account when it talks of justice and democracy in India, and especially for the Modi government. I think the Modi government will not be in a very comfortable situation over this Sheikh Hasina affair. But I don't think, a major section of Bangladesh's people do not think that Prime Minister Modi will be impolitic enough to have Sheikh Hasina extradited when his government knows that no justice will be served, that she has already been condemned, and the only thing that remains to be done is to see her life finished. So I think for the foreseeable future, indeed for the long-term future, until things change in Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina will be in India.
Right. You spoke about the leadership in the Awami League, how there are no second-rung, third-rung leaders. In a sense, isn't Sheikh Hasina responsible for this herself, because she surrounded herself with a very tight-knit clique, and she did not let other leaders grow. So at this point, should she not actually step back from the leadership of the party and allow a new leadership to rebuild the party, as it were? If she were to do that, maybe there are people who do not want to take the initiative right now, but maybe if she announces that, okay, I'm stepping back, I've been indicted, I cannot lead this party anymore, and I'm leaving it to others who can to come up and do so, would that not be a better way to rebuild the Awami League?
That would be for Sheikh Hasina to step back or step away from the leadership of the party in view of the indictment that has been served on her. That would be a very appreciable way for her to let the people of the country know that she is ready to face justice, whether she's in India or by whatever means. But in the interest of the party, the Awami League, if the Awami League doesn't exist, or it simply withers away, that will be terrible for the country, because with the Awami League, Bangladesh's history gets to be washed away. Now, to the earlier part of your question, Sheikh Hasina's leadership of the party, she has been party president since 1981, since May 1981, when she came back from exile in India in that year. And then she had a first stint of prime ministership from 1996 to 2001. That was a good period when her government undertook such measures as repealing the notorious Indemnity Act of 1975. But then over the last 15 years, her leadership changed. The style of leadership changed, which left many people concerned, because she had a good number of ministers, like Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The difference between Sheikh Hasina and her father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman had around him a group of leaders who argued with him, who debated the issues with him, and who collectively reached a party decision prior to 1971 and after 1971, till 1975, that is. But with Sheikh Hasina, it was seen over the last 15 years that although she had these cabinet ministers, a good number of cabinet ministers, and of course parliamentarians, they tended to be more sycophantic than being able to debate policy matters with her. So she created, you used the word clique. Yes, that's the correct word. She did oversee the rise of a clique around her to a point where nobody could argue against her policies. Whatever she said mattered. And on every occasion in Bangladesh, we have seen every time a minister of any particular ministry, of any particular department made a statement, he began his statement, his or her statement, with the idea, with the thought that on the advice of the Honorable Prime Minister, the government has decided. So that left a whole lot of people worried. See, if a Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Finance is talking about a government decision, why must he or she always refer to the directives of the Prime Minister? So, and then because of that situation, the Awami League is in a problem today. Sheikh Hasina did not prepare that kind of leadership. Within the party, there were no elections, which is why when the government fell like a pack of cards, I might add, in August last year, there was no resistance. When Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's historic home was demolished, there was no protest. So because of the inactivity of these leaders, because of their role, they could not have a people assemble who could resist these activities. So there lies the problem. Now, if Sheikh Hasina is aged now, she was born in September 1947, so she's almost she's 78 or 79. It's high time for her to hand over leadership to a new generation of politicians in the party. To what extent she is ready to do that is not known, because over the last 10 months, she has been sadly unable to provide a sense of direction to the country. So to provide a sense of direction to the country, a new set of leaders must come up. But where are those leaders now? Many of these former ministers of Sheikh Hasina's government, many are in exile, have made their way into exile in the UK, some to Canada, some to the US, some to India. So where do you find these leaders? And who do you choose as a leader? Because Sheikh Mujib had Tajuddin Ahmed and Syed Nazrul Islam. Who does Sheikh Hasina have at this point? Well, that is again very worrying for the country. If the Awami League simply withers away, if there's no future leadership of the Awami League, it's an entire nation that will suffer, an entire history of Bangladesh that is already under threat, and it might be wiped out altogether.
Can a case be made that once the prosecution begins and other people are the trial is held for Sheikh Hasina and others, the ban on the Awami League itself becomes it's seen as on shaky legal ground, and they may have to lift the ban on the Awami League because yes, they're prosecuting some people, so that is going on. So it makes no sense really to ban the entire party. And thus, you may have a second rung coming up, do a reckoning of what has gone wrong in the past and come up with a plan for the future. Is that a possibility? And in that sense, the prosecution itself of Sheikh Hasina may be a good thing.
First of all, to the question of the ban on the Awami League, yes, that was not a wise step on the part of the interim government. Now, that should have been kept separate from the case of corruption, from the instances of corruption that the interim government is intent on prosecuting.
So also, the case of the police or the orders to the police to fire on the protesters.
Yes, exactly. Those could have been handled those cases should have been handled under the proper rules and regulations in a court of law. So, but the Awami League, banning the Awami League as a political party, the Awami League, the activists of the Awami League, the leaders of the Awami League at the grassroots and the level and the national level, they cannot be termed as having taken part in any measures which include corruption or any other violation of the rule of law. So the interim government could have prosecuted, could have named the individuals who could be or who should be prosecuted in a court of law, but leave the Awami League aside, because the Awami League is a major party. And historically, every time the Awami League has been under pressure, since Pakistani times, under the Ayub Khan regime, General Yahya Khan banned the Awami League, and in post-liberation Bangladesh, the Awami League was under pressure during the times of two military dictators, General Ziaur Rahman and General Hussein Muhammad Ershad. But the Awami League always bounced back because it had that set of leaders who lead it back to respectability, to acceptability. Now, as far as the present Awami League is concerned, the party is there, but in a very scattered form. Now, why, if pressure, as you pointed out, couldn't there be a second rung of leaders ready to take over from Sheikh Hasina? One other problem with the Awami League, with many Awami League activists even now and leaders, is that they revere Sheikh Hasina. And they revere Sheikh Hasina largely because she happens to be the daughter of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So that reverence is still there. And people, Awami League supporters, I can see it on social media, in conversations with other people, they still think that Sheikh Hasina is the right person to lead the Awami League back to power, or let's say back to the center of politics. But now with the indictment of Sheikh Hasina, I think Sheikh Hasina on her own should be able to consult her party leaders. She's always addressing a party activist on video from India. She's been addressing people in Bangladesh, in West Bengal, in Canada, in America, in the United Kingdom, and parts of Europe. So she could now, I think, take steps to get in touch with other leaders of a party and have them, direct them, give them directives on how to reorganize the party and step away from it. And until this entire prosecution, entire course of investigations against her comes to an end. One doesn't know when that will come to an end or what the interim government intends to do. Of course, we don't expect Sheikh Hasina to step away from the leadership of the Awami League and at the same time decide that she will go to Bangladesh to face trial. But she has said she has been very brave enough to say she'll face any trial. But then, given the situation in Bangladesh at that point, her return, it would not be a feasible one. But what will be feasible for her is to take steps which could revitalize the party, because the party is an organization that should not be allowed to die. Because in 10 months, if a party has not been able to revitalize itself, to revive itself, that is a very sad situation on the country. And people in Bangladesh, as I said 3 to 40%. Now, since the banning of the Awami League, the feeling among people I talk to, their feeling is that individuals, citizens who never supported the Awami League in the past, even they are becoming sympathetic to the Awami League. So that number could increase. And if the Awami League is unbanned, say, hypothetically speaking, if the Awami League is unbanned today, and if an election is held today, there's a good chance that it will go back to power. Maybe not to the vast majority, maybe in the form of a coalition. But then again, there are the problems with the interim government itself. The chief advisor, Muhammad Yunus, he told his advisors at the cabinet meeting just last week that the Awami League is destabilizing the country. So in other words, that means despite the banning of the Awami League, the interim government feels that there is a threat from the Awami League and it is not comfortable with it. So there we have a whole bunch of problems here.
So he feels that it's still powerful enough to shake up his governance or his rule of Bangladesh. But
yeah.
Is the army going to permit an election to go ahead without the Awami League? I mean, they have been calling for inclusive elections. The army chief, General Waqar Zaman, has been saying that there has to be an inclusive election and it has to be held before December. So in that sense, is he hinting to the interim government and to the interim administration and to the chief advisor, Professor Mohammed Yunus, that they need to lift the ban on the Awami League and allow it to participate in the election?
I think some kind of subtle pressure is there from the army, the pressure on the Yunus government, because see when General Waqaruzzaman, the army chief, about a couple of weeks ago, he made it clear that elections have to be held by December this year. Promptly, Professor Yunus said that he was thinking of resigning. Of course, one doesn't expect him to resign. A lot of people think that was a gimmick in order to test his popularity. Then the Yunus government came forth with the idea that elections will be held anywhere, any time between December this year and June next year. But with the army has been playing a very subtle, very positive game, I might add, because in the last few days, the army chief has also gone on record as saying that the values of the liberation war will not be sacrificed, will not be set aside, and rule of law will be maintained. Just the day before yesterday, in the northern city of Rangpur, which is the hometown of the former military leader General Hussain Mohammad Ershad, his party is now led by his younger brother GM Qadir. So the family home, the Ershad family home in Rangpur, was vandalized, was beginning to be vandalized when the army moved in, and the commander of the army in that region, he called these student leaders, he summoned these student leaders to him in the middle of the night, and he warned them that this kind of vandalism will not be tolerated, and the rule of law will be maintained. That has made these young people, young supporters of the interim government and the interim government as such very careful. And last week, it was the same kind of statement that General Waqaruzzaman made. He also said that vandalism or any measures that go against the rule of law, that violate the security of citizens, will not be tolerated. So the elections, if the army insists on the elections, something can be done, but the army chief and all army commanders have to be more firm about it, because Yunus has again come forth with the notion that publicly he made it clear that except for one party, no party demands elections. By that one party, he meant the BNP, which has been demanding elections for the last 10 months. And the BNP's demand is understandable because it has been out of power since October 2006. So it would like to have elections. But then to have inclusive elections, as the army chief has pointed out, as large sections of people in the country also acknowledge, to have inclusive elections, it will be absolutely necessary to have the Awami League take part in the elections. And to have the Awami League take part in the elections, the Yunus government has to devise the ways and means by which the ban on the party can be lifted. Because if elections are held without the Awami League, they'll not be credible at all. In the same way that in the last few elections under the Awami League government, when the BNP did not take part or withdrew from the elections midway through the voting, those elections were never regarded as credible. And I think that was a discredit to the Awami League government. So in the same way, if the Awami League is kept out of the election this time, that election will not be regarded as credible. So here I think the army, especially General Waqaruzzaman, they do have a point, because and one must remember that it's in the hands of the army. The army is the only disciplined force in the country now, and apart from the president of the republic, President Mohammad Shahabuddin, the army chief, the air force chief, and the navy chief, they were all appointed by the Awami League government. They are all in office thanks to the Awami League government. All other appointments since August 2024 are considered to be unconstitutional, because the government itself under Yunus is unconstitutional. So the future is still uncertain, but I think the country is going there if the army sticks to its demand that election be held by December, or even if it's not held by December, the army must insist that inclusivity means adding or bringing in the Awami League also to the election.
So, in a sense, the Awami League is now looking to the army to actually play a role in bringing it back into political life in Bangladesh.
Yes, the Awami League has no choice at this point other than banking on the army to clear the debris that has gathered since August last year.
And as you said, the appointments of the three chiefs were made by the Sheikh Hasina government, by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. So is there a feeling here that they owe this to her?
Well, no, I won't say they owe this to her. They owe this to the proper rules of government, proper rules of service under which they were appointed. But yes, one could say that when they were appointed again on the basis of the fact that they were loyal not only to the government, the constitutional government which existed at the time, they were also all loyal to the principles and values of the 1971 War of Liberation. So that sense of values is still working in them. Although many things have happened on their watch. For example, on the 5th of August, Sheikh Mujib's house was torched. 6 months later, it was demolished. And all other symbols of the War of Liberation have been destroyed in the country, all under on the watch of the army, or the army stood by. But now I think, in order to, if they see the trajectory the country is taking, the Jamaat Islami has come back, and all these organizations, these militant Islamist organizations like the Hizb ut-Tahrir, they are there, and then there are reports of Pakistani military officials coming to Bangladesh, ISI officials coming to Bangladesh and trying to establish links with the Bangladesh government. These are very concerning things. And the army, or in broad measure, the armed forces, Bangladesh's armed forces, I don't think they will take all these things lying down at one point. If worse comes to worse, they will act.
Right. You mentioned that if elections are held today, then it is possible that Awami League, because it has become more popular after the ban, it might actually come back to power. But that is not what we are hearing. We are hearing, and this is one of the reasons why the BNP is so eager to have the election held by December, is that they believe that they are going to sweep this election. And that is what we hear too, that the BNP is, if the elections are held, that it will be the party in power.
Yes. No, when I talked about the Awami League's prospects, the elections, if it is permitted to election, there's a sympathy factor that has been working of late for the Awami League, although not for its doings in the last government. The corruption of the ministers, that is roundly condemned by even supporters of the Awami League. That is there. That point is there. But if elections are held, there is we do not feel that the Awami League will win a straight majority, but it just might squeak through. Now, as far as the BNP is concerned, yes, the BNP is very confident that it will win the election, but the BNP is also worried that the Jamaat Islami is getting ahead of it. Now, Jamaat Islami used to be the BNP's junior partner in earlier times. When the BNP was last in office from 2001 to 2006, the Jamaat was part of a coalition with it. Now, since August last year, the Jamaat has gone ahead. Jamaat has worked very quietly and very softly. The Jamaat has been asking for local government elections first, rather than general elections. And the BNP Secretary General Mirza Fakhrul Islam Alamgir, he noted the other day that the Jamaat Islami is one party that does not want the elections because it fears the BNP might come back to power. Now, the problem with the BNP now, it is massively popular, of course, because not only because it's been out of power for so many years, also because of the repression that was exercised on it by the Awami League government. That is also a factor which has gone against the Awami League. So that history of repression is always there. Feeling is the BNP's leader, Begum Khaleda Zia, is effectively out of contention now because she's too aged and she's too ill. She was in London for a few months. She recently went back to Dhaka after treatment. But the power, all political power in the party, rests in the hands of her son, Tariq Rahman, who has been in exile in the UK since he was forced out of the country by the last caretaker government in the year 2007. So the question that many people ask is why Tariq Rahman has not been going back to Bangladesh.
Exactly.
A number of cases have been against him have been withdrawn, have been lifted. There are quite a few more. But the bigger point is that the feeling is that the interim government does not want him to go back to Bangladesh now. In other words, an unwritten instruction is there not to have Tariq Rahman return to Bangladesh. Because imagine the situation. If Tariq Rahman returns to Bangladesh today, let's say he defies all the restrictions and goes back to Bangladesh, that will create a huge wave of support for the BNP, a wave that the interim government will not be able to stem, will not be able to roll back. So that is the problem. But the point is, how long can one keep the BNP at bay? How long can you prevent Tariq Rahman from going back home? A point will come. Now, of late, the Jamaat Islami has been working against the BNP, and these student supporters who have formed this new political party, National Citizens Party, NCP they call it, they have also been publicly voicing their arguments against the BNP, accusing the BNP of a thirst for power. Naturally, the BNP will have a thirst for power because it has to go to power according to its activists, because it has been out of power, and it also believes that any measures to get the country back on the right track will need an elected government. The Awami League and the BNP have been insisting for months on the return of an elected government through elections, and that is what is also that's something which is also worrying the Yunus government, because the Yunus government knows that the BNP cannot be held at bay much longer. So the BNP has to will come back. And as far as the Awami League is concerned, the question of the ban on the Awami League will have to be revisited. Otherwise, the country, you can't have the future of the country in the hands of the Jamaat Islami, in the hands of this NCP, and all in the hands of the mobs which have been creating chaos, anarchy all over Bangladesh in the last 10 months.
So recently we saw that one of the people who had been convicted and sentenced by the International Criminal Court in Bangladesh, which, as you mentioned, was set up by Sheikh Hasina to try the collaborators of the 1971 war. So one of those people, a Jamaat Islami member, I think his name is yes, Azharul Islam. He was released, and upon his release, the head of the Jamaat Islami held a press conference, and he said that the party apologized to the nation, and that if it had done anything hurtful to the people of Bangladesh, then it is seeking a pardon from them. So this sounded like they wanted to revisit their past, but they did not mention 1971 at all. They did not mention their collaboration with the Pakistan Army at all. So how has this been received among the public in Bangladesh? What are people saying about this?
No, the people are not happy with this sort of statement from the Jamaat Islami.
It's a little mealy-mouthed, I think. It has
mealy-mouthed is very ambiguous.
Yeah.
And the people feel that when a party chief or when any politician says if we have made any mistake. The question is not if mistakes were made. The historical record is there. All the old newspapers are there. In Bangladesh itself, the statements of the Jamaat Islami leaders in 1971 about the determination to maintain the integrity of Pakistan in their words, and also post 1971 when the late Jamaat leader Ghulam Azam, he was stranded in Pakistan in 1971 from November 1971, and then he was sent off to these different Middle Eastern countries by the Bhutto government to argue the case against Bangladesh. And he told these leaders of these Middle Eastern countries, all these countries that he visited, that Muslims were being killed by the Mujib government. The Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the majority of Bangladeshi people are Muslim. So this false propaganda was spread in the Middle East around that time. But in 1971, we all know, I was there, I belong to a generation which was there in 1971. We saw what the Jamaat Islam did, and all these trials that took place of the Jamaat leaders during Sheikh Hasina's time, they were these trials produced. These trials were based on the record. So if the Jamaat Islami is actually apologetic about 1971, it should be able to come out with a clear statement. I think a clear statement saying that we made mistakes in 1971, we should not have supported the Yahya Khan military regime, and we respect the 3 million people of Bangladesh who died because of the work of the Pakistani military regime and their local collaborators. I think that will give the Jamaat a whole lot more credibility among Bangladesh voters. It's the same thing when they're being so mealy-mouthed. It's like the different Pakistani governments since 1971. They've never expressly apologized. Bhutto said in Dhaka when he came in June 1974, he used the word Toba. We say Toba. Saying Toba is an Islamic word, which is saying, we are horrified. No, that is not the case. Then General Pervez Musharraf, he came and said, we regret. So this kind of statement is not applicable. What Pakistan should have done is to officially acknowledge the crimes of its army in 1971 and put it on the record. They didn't do it. In the same way, the Jamaat Islami and all other political elements, Bengali collaborationist elements who supported Pakistan, they need to come forth with a clear statement of regret, publicly stated, so that Bangladesh's people will feel reassured. Now, a lot of people feel that the present generation of Bangladeshis, they do not remember 1971. They have no link with 1971. No, yes, but they do. They read history. They know what happened. Young people who, let's say, were born, 15 or 20 years ago, they know the history of the country. So you have to impress these people. You have to tell these people that you're sorry. Now, condemning the Awami League is one thing, for its corruption, for its misrule, for its violation and the rules of law. That's one thing. But then history is something else, and the Jamaat has to own up to it clearly and without ambiguity.
Right. You mentioned the army chief's speech last week to his officers about the rule of law and elections and other issues. So there was a lot of talk then that the army is not on the same page as the interim administration, and perhaps a takeover by the army is on the cards. A takeover of the country by the army is on the cards. But now it seems that those differences might have been exaggerated. What are you hearing about this?
Well, yeah, on the one hand, those differences might have been exaggerated. On the other hand, it's also true that the army is not happy. The army and the Yunus administration, they are not happy with each other because Yunus feels the pressure of the army. The army feels that there's a nationwide pressure for elections. The army knows that unless there's an elected government, there's a constitutional government, things cannot go back to normal. Rule of law cannot be ensured. These points are there. But as far as the takeover by the army is concerned, I don't think, that's absolutely my personal opinion. I don't think the army is ready to take over. The army will not step in because, first of all, the Bangladesh army at this point remembers the role of the army, the periods in Bangladesh's history when the army took charge of the country during Ershad's time, and on 15th August 1975, and later in 1982 when General Ershad seized power of an elected president, Justice Abdul Sattar. So the army would not like to go back into that situation where it may find itself in the same situation as early military regimes. So what the army can do is stay there, ensure that elections are held in good time, ensure that elections are inclusive, and ensure that there are free, fair, and credible elections. The army is at the moment, at this point in time, the army is the best guarantor for a return to constitutional government. And this return to constitutional government is absolutely important because the people of Bangladesh, on the whole, they have also become sort of tired over the kind of politics in the last 25, 30 years. The BNP and the Awami League, both have these broad masses of public support, but no political leader, either in the BNP or in the Awami League, Begum Khaleda Zia or Sheikh Hasina, no one has ever graduated to being a national leader. Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia, they've both been prime ministers, but essentially they've been leaders of the BNP and the Awami League in that order. They've been prime ministers for their supporters, not for the country as a whole. In fact, not since Sheikh Mujibur Rahman from the mid-60s up to his assassination have we had a national leader who could unite all the people, bring all the people together. So in Bangladesh, we need leadership that can go beyond these concerns, go beyond these constrictions, these constraints, constraints, and then foster a system of government where we can have a legitimate parliament, where members of parliament are politically elected, where members of parliament are not businessmen who are given party tickets because they contribute to the party machine. And we saw in the last parliament as much as 70% of parliamentarians in the last Jatiyo Shongshad or parliament, they were all businessmen, and the result was nothing was discussed. There was no, in parliament, I may refer to the Indian parliament, the kind of debate that goes on, the constructive debate, sometimes the angry debate that goes on, but debate is essential in parliament. In Bangladesh's parliament, we have never had that kind of debate in the last so many years because politicians, these grassroots politicians, they were denied party nominations. These nominations went to these businessmen. They became members of parliament. They looked after their own interests naturally, and so they didn't have any reason to question the government on any issue, to talk about policy issues. Then again, there was always the absence of a credible opposition in parliament in the last 15 years. When you have an opposition party with 7 or 8 seats in parliament in a 350 member seat parliament, 350 member parliament, that is not democracy.
So that's also the fear now, isn't it? That if there's an election now, and if the BNP, say, were to sweep the elections, there won't be an opposition, or there won't be an opposition that is a centrist opposition. It might be the opposition might be the Jamaat, or it might be some other extremist Islamist parties. So what are your thoughts on that?
The ideal situation, as far as the next election is concerned, would be for the Awami League to be unbanned and permitted to take part in the election, and for an election result that will produce a tight result for these two parties. Now, if, like the Awami League, the BNP sweeps the election, it will be back to square one. See, and secondly, if the Jamaat-e-Islami becomes the opposition in parliament, that will also not be a very happy occurrence for the country, because we have a choice between the BNP, which is which is more or less a liberal democratic party, and the Jamaat, which is yet to acknowledge its role in 1971. But if the Awami League is there, and if the BNP is there, if people choose to vote for either of these two parties, and if the voting is concentrated, focused, so much so that the margin of difference between the two is very small, I think that is the kind of election that we need. Because in our country, since 1970 was different, of course, because the Awami League won the elections in Pakistan, and history went the other way because of Pakistani machinations. But after that, every time we've had an election, it's always been one party, sort of claiming the entire parliament for itself. That has been that plus the fact that we've had political dynasties in place. These things have worked against democracy in our country. You can't have dynasties in a democracy, but we have had them, and now we see the result, because democracy, it collapses every few years. So in order to avoid that, I think an election of the kind that I've talked about could take place. The party should be allowed to campaign freely and let the people decide. I think the people are wise now. They'll be able to decide. And if an election produces a result with no party gaining a majority, that will be extremely good for the country, I would say. That will force these political parties to get into talks about forming a coalition, or about forming a grand coalition of the kind which the CDU and the SPD in former West Germany have formed in 1966, with Kurt George Kiesinger as Chancellor and Willy Brandt as Deputy Chancellor. That kind of situation, that kind of politics is something we look forward to. We have never had that kind of politics, but if it does happen to the next election, if that kind of miracle does happen, I think we'll be all the better for it.
Yeah, that seems a bridge too far right now, but I'm just going to take you back to the army. And it was said at that time last week that the differences between the army and the interim administration revolved particularly around one issue, which is, or two issues, which is, one was the appointment of the National Security Advisor without consultation with the army. His name is Khalilur Rahman. And he then proposed a humanitarian corridor from Bangladesh into Myanmar. And the army, again, was not consulted before such an announcement was made. And the army sees that as that humanitarian corridor, so-called humanitarian corridor, as a threat to its national security. The junta in Myanmar has lost control of the Rakhine state, into which this corridor was supposed to lead from Bangladesh into Myanmar. So isn't it in Bangladesh's interests, which is playing host to over a million Rohingya, to establish some sort of contact with the Arakan army, which is actually in control there, so that the Rohingya armed group, which is the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, does not gain ground? The ARSA, which is the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, it's already active in Bangladesh. It's been named for carrying out murders in the refugee camps and so on. And it's banned as a terrorist group in Myanmar. So given all this, why has this humanitarian corridor become such a big issue?
Well, I think the feeling is that this, first of all, the humanitarian corridor idea was sponsored by the interim government, especially by the National Security Advisor, Khalilur Rahman. We have never had a National Security Advisor in Bangladesh all these decades. But then it was done without consultation with the army. Now, the army is justifiably concerned that this humanitarian corridor, will open up new avenues of problem for the country. First of all, because the Arakan National Army, and then there's the ARSA. So there's no guarantee, given Bangladesh's weak state politically at this point, there's no guarantee that these elements of ARSA and the Arakan rebels, they will not take advantage of the situation to operate from within Bangladesh. As it is, there are reports that these Arakan rebels, they move freely across the border between Myanmar, between Rakhine State and Bangladesh. So we feel, a lot of people feel, and I'm sure the military also feels that way, that if the humanitarian corridor is allowed, it might at some point turn into an area, into a point where these rebels, these Myanmar rebels or rebels opposed to the army of the military junta in Myanmar might take advantage of the situation, and Bangladesh will be regarded. Bangladesh will become a source of supply of arms, not beyond food and other items for Rohingya. It just might become a source of ammunition and weapons for these rebels, and that might lead to a conflict between the Myanmar military regime and the Bangladesh government. This one, as also any elected government in the future. So the army's concerns do resonate with people in Bangladesh, and when the army chief made it clear that the military will not allow any humanitarian corridor, I think he felt the pulse of the nation, the broad sections of the country, because I'm sure he also knew that this humanitarian, on the pretext of this humanitarian corridor, it will not only be the Myanmar rebels who will benefit through using Bangladesh territory. It will also be a point where militants, Islamist militants, there are records of Islamist militants having been trained in the Chittagong hill tracks. So these militants will become even more active in trying to dislodge the administration within Bangladesh. And on top of everything, these activities resultant upon this humanitarian corridor might lead to a situation where the entirety of the Chittagong Hill Tracts region, including places such as Cox's Bazar, where we still have more than 1 million Rohingya refugees, and reports suggest that in the last 10 months, about 50 to 60,000 more refugees have come in, unverified reports, of course. So these conditions will worsen. It will exacerbate the situation. So the army does have a point in arguing against the corridor, even if the government, the Yunus government, had approached the army, had consulted the army before agreeing to the humanitarian corridor, or if Khalilur Rahman had approached the army on that point, I don't think the army would have agreed. It's not a question of the army's ego being hurt. The army realizes the long-term implications of the humanitarian corridor that might affect the territorial integrity of Bangladesh in its southeastern region.
Is there also a fear that Western foreign troops might actually use that humanitarian corridor? For instance, the US military might station itself there to supply the Arakan army, or to send in arms to help the rebels that are fighting the junta?
Yes,
Is that also a fear?
That's a fear. That's a very valid concern, because you see, we're also worried about American attempts at, islands like Saint Martin. Saint Martin is a tourist spot, but then Bangladeshis themselves can't go to Saint Martin Island without registering themselves. Now, the American policy in Bangladesh since August last year has been made very manifest, because the Biden administration, and I believe the Trump administration too, despite Trump's no love lost for Yunus, I think they will see to it that their interests are served. Firstly, because they would like to help the rebels, the Arakan rebels, and the other, keep a check on India and China. Now, India happens to be our traditional neighbor, historical neighbor. We are part of India. With China, yes, Bangladesh has been trying since Sheikh Hasina's time, even before that, to develop relations on the economic and other bases, for example, defense matters. So the American policy is clearly, Western policy, particularly American policy, will clearly be aimed at looking at these factors. First of all, helping the Myanmar rebels with arms and ammunition, which will be routed through Bangladesh. That will impinge on Bangladesh's interests, Bangladesh's sovereignty. And secondly, to keep a check on India and China, which will place Bangladesh in a very difficult geopolitical situation. And strategically, geostrategically, Bangladesh is a state which is not equipped militarily or influence-wide to forestall, to offset that challenge. So I think by sending out that message against the humanitarian corridor, the army, the military, was actually echoing the feelings of a lot of Bangladeshis who feel uncomfortable at what has been happening or what might happen in the Chittagong hill tracts in the southeast.
So one of the things that was said in the wake of Sheikh Hasina's ouster last year, it was widely widely expressed in the Indian media as well, is that the United States had a hand in the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. And when Sheikh Hasina herself then mentioned that a white man asked her about St. Martin's Island, then this, of course, this theory got some wings. I just want to ask you whether India would have actually allowed a friendly nation like the United States, would have just stood by and watched a friendly nation like the United States burn down the house next door, burn down the house in which India had so many stakes. Would India have just stood by and allowed this to happen if the US was really involved in that ouster?
Well, you see, it's very obvious that elements in the United States, especially in the Democratic Party, in the Democratic Party government, they were never truly well disposed towards Sheikh Hasina. When the Hasina government went after Professor Yunus following his winning of the Nobel Prize for Peace, then it was people like Secretary of State Hillary Clinton who were disturbed, who made angry phone calls to Sheikh Hasina. Then again, in the under the Biden administration, there were indications that the Biden administration was not happy with Sheikh Hasina. Although Sheikh Hasina, when she went to New York for the United Nations General Assembly session, she did meet Biden on the sideline. Her family members, including her daughter, they were also there. So then she came out with the statement of a white man's suggestion, proposal regarding the hill tract. So we were quite surprised when she made that statement because she didn't go any further. She didn't come forth with the details. But whether that statement actually is linked with what is happening now is something that we can't say for sure. No one can say that she had some knowledge of what the government was trying to do, what the American government was trying to do. Then on top of that, when Professor Yunus went to the UN last year, he met Bill Clinton at the Clinton Foundation, and he talked about a meticulous plan for the removal of Sheikh Hasina's government. So that has also led to questions. What was that meticulous plan? Who were involved in the country and outside? And he was, you can see the pictures from that time available, very effusive reception by President Biden at that time. So these worries have always been there. They are still there. Now, whether India would have agreed to that state, I don't think so. No, India would not agree. India, the Modi government has the best of relations with the United States, has had the best of relations with the United States during Biden's time, and now with the Trump administration. So I think if any such moves are made, apart from our fears of Bangladeshis regarding Western interests, if the American government intends to have such a policy work in Bangladesh, if the American government intends to intrude into Bangladesh territory, you see, on the excuse of helping the Myanmar rebels, and in effect threatening a destabilization of Bangladesh, I think the Indian government will put its foot down. The Indian government will not take it easy because of another factor, because it also knows that there's also China. And the Chinese, once they see the Americans coming in, the Chinese could also come into Myanmar on a bigger scale, and that will only promote more destabilization in the region. And India, with all its own issues to deal with, internal issues basically, and of course also with this interest in becoming a world power. India is a world power now. India and China are the not rising but risen world powers. I don't think India will be neither India nor China will be able to accept or will accept this kind of intrusion by American interests in Bangladesh, because if Bangladesh's stability is undermined by any such intrusion, it will place the entire region in a position of difficulty, because it might create complications for not only for Bangladesh, it might also lead to questions about what might happen to India, what might happen to China, because it has borders with India or with Myanmar. So I don't think the Indian government will play a very, because Indian foreign policy, as far as I can see, has been very clear in the last more than 10 decades, more than one decade of the Modi government. So, and as Mr. Jaishankar has been pointing out, India's foreign policy very well, very articulate, in a very articulate manner. I think India will respond if such a situation arises. But yes, the concern expressed by the army chief is also good for us, because it will put our interim government on its tracks. It will not go any further.
You spoke about China, and of course, the chief advisor went to China, and he spoke at the Bao Forum, and he made that very controversial remark about inviting the Chinese to set up a trading zone with India's northeastern states, which is, of course, met with a very with some penalties on Bangladesh exports through the land transit arrangements with India and into India itself. But again, there is a high-powered, as we speak, there's a high-powered Chinese delegation led by the Chinese Commerce Minister in Dhaka just now. And Professor Yunus has reportedly said that China should invest more in Bangladesh economy. Sheikh Hasina also had a very close relationship with Beijing. It was during her years in office that Bangladesh joined the Belt and Road Initiative, Xi Jinping's big connector initiative, and also began buying weapons from China. So what's the difference between her and Yunus really in this matter?
Hardly any difference, because when you speak of Sheikh Hasina's links, Sheikh Hasina's government's links with China, buying weapons, seeking defense equipment from China, and the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, the Belt and Road Initiative has been very concerning for many of us in Bangladesh, because of the consequences of it we have seen in other parts of the world, where China's footsteps are almost everywhere, in Africa, for instance, in Latin America, in Pakistan. The Gwadar port, they built an international airport, which they can't use now. They're not being able to use. And add to that the rise in insurgency in Balochistan. So what the Yunus government has been doing has actually been carrying forward Sheikh Hasina's policies vis-a-vis China. So, but then we should also be mindful of the fact that no matter how much we agree, how much closer we get to China in terms of economic relations, defense relations, our focal point is India, because traditionally we have maintained good relations with India in all spheres. So, but to think for any Bangladeshi that because relations with India are not so good at this point, we can substitute India, we can replace India with China. That is not a very feasible option, and we welcome good bilateral relations with between Bangladesh and any other country, and as far as India is concerned, we feel that the Modi government, it should have now that should have done more in dealing with the crisis that erupted in Bangladesh in August 2024. But then, did the Indian government really know what was happening, or to turn the question to a statement? Yes, of course, the Modi government, I'm sure, knew of the level of discontent that was rising against Sheikh Hasina's government over the last few years. So I think they knew about it. They knew about it, and um, they simply waited for a situation where they would not be, the Indian government, that is, would not be expected to intervene in Bangladesh. That was good policy, I think. But what the Indians certainly did not expect, and what we in Bangladesh certainly did not expect, was the anarchy that would replace the fall of the Awami League government. We did not. We expected that Sheikh Hasina's government had been overthrown. That was understood, okay, because of its record, because of the growing public discontent. But that Sheikh Hasina's replacement, Sheikh Hasina's fall, would quickly take shape into an assault on the country's history, and into an assault on the country's heritage, and into an assault on these religious minorities. That is something we did not expect. So I think for now, at this point, the Modi government should be able to interact with the Yunus government till the election, of course, and interact in the sense that certain measures, such as closing land borders, which does not allow Indian goods to go into Bangladesh or Bangladeshi goods to come into, I think that those measures should be relaxed, because if they are not relaxed, it's the people of Bangladesh who suffer. And again, to a certain extent, the people of India, in West Bengal, for instance, West Bengal, places like Calcutta, they're always full of tourists from Bangladesh, and
Medical tourists.
medical tourists and other visitors, and places in Calcutta like New Market. These shopkeepers are in a very bad state of mind these days, because there were no visitors from Bangladesh because of visa restrictions, and their trade is suffering. In Bangladesh, we need Indian products such as onions, a basic food item we need. So these measures should be relaxed. Now, I'm not saying that the Modi government will establish or should establish friendly relations with the Yunus. It can't, because the hostility between the two governments is too clear. But then there could be a workable relationship. A gentle pressure or influence could be exercised by the Indian government and by other governments also on the present dispensation in Bangladesh, in order to clear the road for democracy, proper democracy, to return to Bangladesh. And as far as China is concerned, what China is there in Bangladesh, Belt and Road Initiative is there. But I wonder if any future government will go along with the Belt and Road Initiative, because the Chinese are building an airport in the north of the country, is building an airport in Cox's Bazar. Whether those airports will redound to the benefit of Bangladeshi citizens, that remains a question. We don't want any Gwadar in Bangladesh, and we don't want any Hamban Tota in Bangladesh. So let's see what happens. So at the end of the day, see, everything depends. Our relations with India, our relations with China, our geopolitical position in the region and in the wider world depends on how soon we can return Bangladesh to an elected government. So if we have a strong government, if we have a national government, or a government which reaches out to all the people of the country, it will give us an opportunity to fashion, forge a foreign policy which would be of benefit to Bangladesh's people, and of course to the region as such. We'd like to have excellent relations with India again. We'd like this deterioration to be rolled back, so that we can get back to what the position was before August last year. And with China, with Russia, and even with Myanmar on the Rohingya question, we'd like to have a policy change where Bangladesh will benefit, Bangladesh will have its own national interest upheld without threatening the national interest of any other nation. Given Bangladesh's political history and its background, political background in relation to India and to the neighborhood, I think Bangladesh will do very well, will do very well for itself, for its people, if its links with China are properly studied and properly taken care of. We simply cannot have any nation, China or any other nation, just to tell us, inform us that we are ready to help you and we are coming in. So we have to be very careful, very meticulous about allowing these countries any entry into Bangladesh, no matter they might be very good economic deals, or we have to be careful about why are the Chinese so interested in investing in Bangladesh. Are they trying to turn us against India? Are they trying to create a situation where Bangladesh can be some kind of state like Pakistan, which is forever, arrayed against India? No, we wouldn't want that. So again, it is only for an elected government to come into office and then to devise policy at the national level that will seek to examine all these policy options, and that will also take into consideration our broad long-term links with China. The Bangladesh government, Bangladesh civil society, Bangladesh armed forces, all of us have to be careful about China. We want good relations with China, but then there must be a point where we will say thus far and no further.
This whole attempt to revive the Pakistan-Bangladesh relationship, how serious is this? Are these efforts, and are they more from the Pakistani side, or is Bangladesh ready to now forgive and forget the past and normalize the relationship with Pakistan?
Thank you. That's an interesting question. The interest in Bangladesh-Pakistan relations is basically from the Pakistani side. As far as Bengalis, Bangladeshi citizens are concerned, we are least concerned, we're least worried about what our relations will be with Pakistan. But of late, and of course even before that, since 1971 in fact, it has been successive Pakistani governments and Pakistani groups which have been interested in normalizing, in what they call normalizing relations with Pakistan. Now,
Bangladesh.
With Bangladesh. Pakistanis trying to normalize relations with Bangladesh. Our perspectives, our priorities have been different because since moving away from Pakistan in 1971, our focus has been on our region, to the east. We have been more east looking, and then again to the west, to the wider world. But Pakistan as a whole, no, it hasn't mattered. Yes, we sometimes talk about Pakistan, we write about Pakistan, but that's basically about fundamental Pakistani problems. And also when questions arise about Pakistan's inability or failure to apologize to Bangladesh for the actions of its army in 1971 and for its unwillingness to settle the issue of assets and liabilities relating to pre-1971 Pakistan. Now, in these last 10 months, the Pakistanis have been very enthusiastic about the way, very happy, they're cheerful about the way things have been developing or happening in Bangladesh. And if you recall, soon after the fall of Sheikh Hasina's government, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif addressed a group in Islamabad where their army chief, now Field Marshal Asim Munir, he was also present. And it was a group of young Pakistanis. And he was gloating over the fact that Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's statues were being vandalized in Bangladesh. And he told those young people that you see what is happening to the man who broke up Pakistan, his words. So see, that kind of sentiment is still there. Then earlier than that, when these collaborators, 1971 collaborators of the Pakistan army, the Jamaat leaders who were executed, tried and executed during Sheikh Hasina's time, the Pakistani media were absolutely angry. They went over the top in condemning Bangladesh for the executions of what they called loyal Pakistanis in 1971. And now, last week, the Prime Minister said, in referring to the recent conflict with India over Pahalgam, he said that the Pakistanis, in his words, had taught the Indians a good lesson over Pahalgam, and it was revenge for what the Indians did to Pakistan in 1971. In other words, having East Pakistan break away and becoming Bangladesh. Now, that kind of sentiment is still there in Pakistan. And I might add that a few years ago, I had the opportunity, I was invited by the Pakistani Foreign Office to visit Pakistan. With me with a team of journalists. We went to Pakistan and we had meetings with Pakistani diplomats serving and retired. And at tea break, these recruits, these new recruits to the Pakistan Foreign Office, young women, young men, very bright people, they came up to me at tea break while I was having tea, and they said, "Sir, can you ask you a question?" I said, "Yes, go ahead." And they said, "Sir, what exactly did our army do in East Pakistan in 1971? And I was quite surprised. I said, you've been recruited in the Foreign Service. I'm sure you go through Pakistan's history as part of your training program. Weren't you informed of these things?" He said, "No, all we are told is that it was an Indian conspiracy to break up Pakistan in league with some Bengali politicians." So you see, so I told them the whole story, of course. So, but then this is the kind of mentality that still works in Pakistan, thanks to its army, thanks to its politicians, who have not yet reconciled to the idea of Bangladesh. Now, when they want to reconcile with Bangladesh, it's not with Bangladesh as we have known it since 1971. It's with a Bangladesh where they feel that parties like the Jamaat Islami and the Islamist extremists and anti-India elements will come back to power, and that will give them a fresh launching pad for propaganda against India and against all their presumed and known and unknown enemies. So no, as far as the people of Pakistan, as far as Pakistan is concerned, our interest is not there at all. Yes, we have trade teams going to Pakistan, we're visitors going to Pakistan, our citizens watch Pakistani plays on television. But beyond that,
their army delegations have been visiting.
Army delegations have been visiting visiting Bangladesh. But I think that is also a short-term measure. Things will change because we do not relate that our soul. We still believe people who saw 1971. We were part. I was 16 years old in 1971, but I remember how my grandparents' generation and my father's generation, they were all for Pakistan in the 1940s, but how they were revolted by what the Pakistan army was doing in 1971. So we belong to that. We are their children, and our children and our grandchildren, they have the same attitude to Pakistan now. They realize, they know very well that Pakistan committed atrocities. 3 million people were killed. Anywhere between 200,000 and 400,000 Bengali women were raped by Pakistan soldiers, and Pakistan has not apologized for the actions of its army. So all these things are known. You'll see some people in Bangladesh, they will tell you Bangladesh's young people do not understand history, do not know history. That is not true. That is not true at all. They do remember history, do know about history, and they're not very enthusiastic about Pakistan. So I won't be, as a citizen, I think I echo the feelings of a good number of my own fellow citizens when I say that our interest is not in Pakistan. Pakistan is there, but if we are at all interested in Pakistan now, is in how its military is still dominating its politics and how its army is still carrying out atrocities in the province of Balochistan.
I'll just ask you one last question. You spoke about the anarchy that replaced Sheikh Hasina's government. Why has the Yunus administration not been able to take control of the mob violence, the various groups that are coming forth and making demands, the vandalism of Mujib's house? Why has why were they unable to do anything, even while they had the army's support to actually take control of law and order?
The expectations of the Yunus government when it came to office, Yunus was a respected figure. He still is for many people in the country. But the expectation was that after taking over from Sheikh Hasina's government, he would clear the road. I mean, he would clear the accumulated debris and lead the country to a situation where elections were held and a good, credible government, accountable government comes to office. But then it soon became very clear that the interim administration was anti-Awami League. Now, you can be anti-Awami League. Individually, I can be anti-Awami League, anti-BNP or whatever. But then once you are in government or I am in government, it is our job to see to it that justice is served, that the rule of law prevails. But unfortunately, when the torching of Sheikh Mujib's residence was done, a few days after that, shortly after that, Yunus went to the United States, where he addressed the General Assembly, and then he was interviewed by the Voice of America Bengali service. And then the anchor asked him why, on his watch, Sheikh Mujib's house, a historic house, was torched, and he had done nothing about it. And then his answer didn't satisfy anybody. He said, see, it was of course, a meticulous planned organization, but then he said there was a reset button at work. And the question is, what reset button? You don't reset history. So, and the anchor, unfortunately, didn't go forward with the supplementary question. So that showed the inclination of the government, the policy of the government. And over the last 10 months, it has become very clear that the Yunus government, through all its activities against the Awami League, through not allowing Awami League supporters to gather on the streets, through letting all these mobs demolish all these structures, Mujib's house.
And some attacks on the Hindu minority community
yes,
as well.
So these attacks on the Hindu minorities and attacks on the supporters of the Awami League in the interior of the country, there are still Awami League supporters who can't stay at home for fear because they will be targeted by these mobs. Now, if the military can help here, and which is why the BNP is also demanding elections. The BNP has been consistent in demanding that elections take place for the country to go back to order. So unless that, everything depends on when we have the election. So to have the election in good time, we need the army pressure to be kept up. And we also need a timetable, a schedule for the election, which the interim government has not yet brought forward before the public. Then again, we have this election commission, which was appointed by this unconstitutional government. There are political elements who have been demanding that this election commission be replaced with another, which will be regarded as more neutral, more objective. So a whole lot of things, again, have to be done. Then we don't know whether this government will be able to hold the elections or a new set of people will come into a new administration to organize the elections. So we keep fingers crossed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Badrul Ahsan. I know that you have an appointment now to go to. So although I have many more questions to ask, I have to bring this conversation to an end, unfortunately. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure speaking to you.
My pleasure. Anytime.